I'll never forget the look on Richard's face when he opened that email in front of the entire board of directors. His skin went pale, then gray, then almost green. His hand started shaking so badly he dropped his coffee cup, and the sound of porcelain shattering against the marble conference table was the only noise in a room full of 30 people, holding their breath. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That moment, that beautiful, terrible, perfect moment of justice, came after months of hell. After I lost everything. After I was humiliated, gaslit, and nearly destroyed. After I discovered that the man I'd trusted with my career, my loyalty, and my future had been systematically dismantling my life to cover up his own crimes. Let me tell you exactly how a single email brought down a man who thought he was untouchable. Before the story begins, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more exciting stories. That morning in the conference room was supposed to be Richard's coronation. The quarterly earnings presentation where he'd announce record profits and secure his promotion to CEO. He'd been rehearsing for weeks. I know because I'd helped him rehearse, back when I still believed he was the mentor who discovered my potential, not the predator who'd been using me. But let me start where it really began. Let me take you back to the morning I still thought my life was on track. The morning I woke up in my efficient studio apartment in downtown Chicago, 6 months before everything fell apart. The perfect illusion, my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. Same as always. The early morning light filtered through my curtains, casting soft gray shadows across my small but carefully organized space. I could smell the coffee I'd preset the night before, that rich, dark aroma that promised productivity. The sheets were cool against my skin as I stretched, and I remember feeling grateful. Genuinely, stupidly grateful. I was 28 years old and the senior financial analyst at Hartfield & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious investment firms. I'd worked my way up from an entry-level position in just 4 years, pulling 60-hour weeks, mastering complex financial models, earning my CFA certification on nights and weekends. Richard Hartfield himself had promoted me twice, had told the whole office I was the sharpest mind he'd seen in 20 years. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. That morning, I went through my routine with the precision of someone who thought they had control over their life. I showered, feeling the hot water wake up my muscles. I dressed in my navy suit, the one Richard had complimented, saying it made me look executive material. I ate Greek yogurt with blueberries standing at my kitchen counter, scrolling through market reports on my tablet. The yogurt tasted slightly tart, the blueberries sweet and firm. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard, need you in early 7 a.m. Big presentation prep. You're the only one I trust with this. I smiled at that message, felt honored, special, chosen. I had no idea I was already caught in a web that had been spinning around me for months. The morning air hit my face as I left my building, cold and sharp with the promise of November. The city smelled like exhaust and breakfast from the bagel cart on the corner, mixed with that peculiar metallic scent that Chicago gets before it rains. My heels clicked against the sidewalk in a steady rhythm as I walked the 6 blocks to the office. I nodded at the doorman, Marcus, who always had a kind smile, and asked about my day. Early bird today, Miss Catherine? Big presentation? I told him, feeling important. Client pitch worth $40 million. You'll knock it dead, he said. You always do. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor took exactly 57 seconds. I timed it 100 times, usually reviewing notes in my head during the ascent. That morning, I was mentally running through the financial projections for the Henderson account, the massive real estate portfolio that Richard said would make both our careers. What I didn't know was that the Henderson account was a fabrication, a beautiful, detailed lie built on forged documents and manipulated numbers, and I was about to become the scapegoat for all of it. The office was empty when I arrived, just the ambient hum of computers in sleep mode and the ventilation system pushing cool, recycled air through the vents. The smell of commercial carpet cleaner lingered faintly, mixed with someone's leftover Chinese food from the night before. Our office occupied the entire floor. Glass-walled conference rooms, rows of standing desks, a kitchen area that always smelled like burned coffee, and the corner offices where the partners worked. Richard's office door was closed, but I could see the light underneath. I knocked softly. "Come in, Catherine." He was standing by his window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Richard Hartfield was 53 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from inherited wealth and unchallenged authority. He turned when I entered, and his smile was warm, paternal, trustworthy. Everything about him was a lie. "Coffee." He gestured to the French press on his desk. "I made it strong. We're going to need it." The coffee tasted expensive, dark and smooth with notes of chocolate. He'd added exactly the amount of cream I preferred without asking. At the time, I thought it meant he paid attention, that he cared about details. Now I know it meant he'd been studying me, learning my patterns, preparing. "I need to talk to you about something sensitive," Richard said, settling into his leather chair. It creaked softly under his weight. "The Henderson account. There's been some complications." My stomach tightened. I'd spent 3 months building the financial models for Henderson. "What kind of complications?" Questions from their due diligence team. "Some of the projections aren't matching their internal numbers." He leaned forward, his expression concerned, almost apologetic. "I need you to go through everything again. Triple check every assumption, every data point." "Can you do that?" "Of course," I said immediately. "But Richard, I've verified everything 6 times already. The numbers are solid." "I know." He held up his hands in a calming gesture. "I trust you completely, but clients get nervous, especially with this much money involved. Just do it one more time. For me. For us. Like we were a team. Like he had my back." I spent the next 2 weeks working 16-hour days, going through every spreadsheet, every formula, every source document. The office became my entire world. I ate takeout at my desk, pad thai that tasted like nothing because I was too stressed to notice flavor. Salads that wilted in their plastic containers while I stared at numbers until my eyes burned. I slept on the couch in the break room some nights, waking up with my cheek pressed against scratchy fabric, neck aching, mouth tasting like stale coffee. Other analysts would walk past my desk, and I'd catch their expressions. Pity maybe, or concern. Jessica from accounts stopped by once, her perfume, something floral and expensive, announcing her presence before she spoke. "Catherine, honey, when's the last time you went home?" "I'm fine," I said without looking up. "Big account. Richard needs this perfect." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Just be careful, okay?" I didn't understand what she meant. Didn't ask. I was too busy being the dedicated employee, the rising star, the one Richard could count on. But the worst was yet to come. The night before the final Henderson presentation, Richard called me into his office at 11 p.m. The building was empty except for security and the 2 of us. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums. Through his window, Chicago glittered like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold. "It's perfect," Richard said, reviewing my revised models on his computer. "Absolutely perfect. Catherine, you've outdone yourself." I felt warmth spread through my chest. Pride, validation. All those sleepless nights suddenly felt worth it. "I couldn't have done this without you," he continued. "You know that, right? You're the most valuable person on my team. Hell, in this whole company. Thank you," I said, and my voice actually cracked with emotion. "That means everything to me." He stood up, walked around his desk, and did something he'd never done before. He hugged me. It was brief, professional, but I remember thinking it felt fatherly. Safe. I had no idea I was standing in the office of a man who was about to destroy my entire life. "Go home," he said, pulling back and smiling. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we make history." I left his office floating on air, took the elevator down to the lobby, where Marcus was reading a paperback at his desk, stepped out into the November night where the air was crisp and clean, and the city lights reflected off low clouds. I walked home feeling like I'd finally proven myself, like I'd finally arrived. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, the sound of distant traffic lulling me into dreams of promotion letters and corner offices. I woke up to my entire world on fire. My phone was ringing. Not the gentle alarm I'd set for 6 a.m., but an actual call. The harsh vibration rattled my nightstand, and the ringtone, loud, jarring, pulled me from sleep. I fumbled for it in the darkness, my heart already racing because calls before dawn meant emergency. The screen said Jessica. From accounts. "Hello." My voice was rough, confused. "Catherine." She sounded breathless, frightened. Catherine, don't come to the office. Do you hear me? Don't come in. I sat up, fully awake now. Cold air hit my bare arms, raising goosebumps. What are you talking about? The presentation is at 9. The police are here. The words didn't make sense. I heard them, but they bounced off my brain like sounds in a foreign language. Police. Why would? They're looking for you. Catherine. They're saying you embezzled money from the Henderson account. They're saying you falsified documents. Richard is. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Richard is in his office right now crying, telling everyone how betrayed he feels. How he trusted you. How you took advantage of his mentorship. The room started spinning. I pressed my free hand against my chest, trying to breathe, but it felt like someone had wrapped steel bands around my ribcage. That's insane. Jessica, I didn't do anything wrong. Everything I did, Richard approved. He reviewed every single. He's saying he never saw your final versions. That you must have altered the documents after he approved them. Catherine, they have emails. Emails that look like they're from you, moving money around, hiding transactions. They have your digital signature on everything. That's impossible. But even as I said it, I felt the floor dropping out from under me. Because I'd given Richard my digital signature authorization 6 months ago. He'd said it was to streamline approvals when he was in client meetings. Said it showed he trusted me. Oh God, there's more, Jessica said. And I could hear tears in her voice now. They're saying you've been stealing from multiple accounts. That you've taken over $400,000 in the past year. Catherine, your personal bank account. They say it shows deposits that match the stolen amounts. No, that's not. I don't have any money. Jessica, I live in a studio apartment. I drive a used Honda. Where would I know. But someone set this up really carefully. I wanted to warn you before the police showed up at your door. She paused, and I heard voices in the background. I have to go. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The line went dead. I sat there in my bed, phone still pressed to my ear, and the silence was deafening. My heartbeat pounded in my skull. My mouth tasted like metal and fear. The morning light coming through my curtains looked gray and sickly. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. My hands shaking, I opened my banking app. The screen loaded with agonizing slowness. When it finally appeared, I stared at the number at the top. Current balance $427,891. 43. I actually gasped out loud, made a sound like someone had punched me in the stomach, because my normal balance was usually around $3,000. Sometimes less. I scrolled through recent transactions with trembling fingers. Deposits. Dozens of deposits over the past year, each between $5,000 and $20,000. Wire transfers from accounts I didn't recognize. And the dates, they aligned perfectly with discrepancies in client accounts I'd been working on. Someone had been framing me for months. Methodically. Perfectly. And I'd been too busy working, too busy trying to prove myself, too busy trusting Richard to notice. Little did I realize, the nightmare was just beginning. My apartment intercom buzzed. The harsh electronic sound made me jump so violently I dropped my phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. The intercom buzzed again. I walked to it on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Pressed the button. Yes. Chicago Police Department. We need to speak with Catherine Weber. The world became very quiet then. Very still. I could hear my own breathing raspy and too fast. Could hear the radiator clicking as it heated up. Could hear traffic 40, 2 floors below, muffled and distant. I'll be right down, I heard myself say. I dressed in a daze. Pulled on jeans and a sweater, my fingers fumbling with buttons. The sweater felt too tight around my throat. My feet found sneakers. Not the professional heels I'd planned to wear to the presentation. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the pale, wide-eyed woman staring back at me. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real, but it was. The elevator ride down took exactly 57 seconds, same as always. But this time, every second felt like an hour. The small space smelled like someone's cologne, and my own fierce sweat. My reflection in the polished metal doors looked ghostly. Marcus wasn't at the desk when I reached the lobby. Instead, 2 police officers stood near the entrance. A man and a woman, both in uniform, both with expressions that were professionally neutral but not unkind. Catherine Weber, the woman asked. Yes. I'm Officer Martinez, this is Officer Chen. We need you to come with us to answer some questions about financial irregularities at your workplace. Am I under arrest? My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too thin, too scared. Not at this time. We just need to talk. But they read me my rights anyway. As a precaution, they said. The words washed over me. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. And I watched through the glass doors as people on the street walked past. Normal people having normal mornings. Getting coffee, checking their phones, living lives that hadn't exploded. Officer Martinez touched my elbow gently. Ms. Weber, are you ready? I wasn't. But I went anyway. The police station smelled like disinfectant, stale coffee, and human misery. The fluorescent lights were too bright, buzzing faintly, making everything look washed out and surreal. They put me in an interview room, gray walls, metal table, chairs bolted to the floor. The kind of room I'd only seen in crime shows. A detective came in. Detective Morrison, late 40s, tired eyes, carrying a manila folder thick with papers. He sat across from me, and the metal chair scraped against linoleum with a sound that made my teeth ache. Ms. Weber, I'm going to be straight with you. We have substantial evidence of embezzlement. Multiple client accounts show unauthorized transfers. Those transfers correspond with deposits into your personal bank account. Your digital signature is on all the authorization forms. He opened the folder, spread out papers in front of me. Can you explain these? I looked at the documents. They had my signature, my employee ID number, dates and times when I'd been at my computer. I didn't do this, I said. My throat felt raw. Someone forged these. Someone with access to my credentials. Who would have that access? My boss, Richard Hartfield. I gave him authorization to use my digital signature 6 months ago. He said it was for efficiency. Detective Morrison wrote something in his notebook. And why would Mr. Hartfield steal from his own company? I don't know. But I didn't do this. I would never. My voice broke. I pressed my hands flat on the cold metal table, trying to ground myself. Can I see the specific accounts? The transaction details? He showed me. Page after page of withdrawals from client accounts I'd managed. Real estate investment funds, retirement portfolios, trust accounts. Money siphoned off in amounts small enough not to trigger immediate alerts, but large enough to add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And my signature on everything. We also have emails, Morrison said, pulling out more papers. Correspondence between you and an offshore account manager. Discussing how to hide the transfers, how to create false documentation. I never sent those emails. Can I see them? He handed them over. They were from my work email address. My writing style. References to conversations I actually had with Richard about client accounts. But twisted, made to sound criminal. Someone had been reading my emails for months, learning how I wrote. Building a perfect frame. Richard did this, I said. And I could hear the desperation in my own voice. He's been planning this. He needed a scapegoat for his own embezzlement, and he chose me. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Weber. It's the truth. My hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. Please, you have to believe me. Check his accounts. Check his transactions. He's the one with access to everything. He's the one who... Mr. Hartfield has been extremely cooperative. Morrison interrupted. He came to us voluntarily when he discovered the discrepancies. He provided us with all the evidence. He's been devastated by your betrayal. Devastated. By my betrayal. The room started to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table, feeling bile rise in my throat. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, burning into my eyes. I could hear the buzz of electricity, the distant sound of phones ringing, someone coughing in another room. I need a lawyer, I whispered. That's your right, Morrison said. He actually looked sympathetic. But Ms. Weber, the evidence is overwhelming. If you cooperate, tell us where the money is. Things will go easier for you. I don't have any money. I didn't take anything. I didn't do anything wrong. But I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe me. No one was going to believe me. Richard had set this up too perfectly. They let me go eventually, but I wasn't really free. They told me not to leave the city. Told me I'd be formally charged within 48 hours. Gave me a business card for a public defender because I couldn't afford a private lawyer on my real salary. The one that barely covered rent and student loans. I walked out of that police station into a gray Chicago afternoon. The sky was low and heavy with clouds that hadn't existed that morning. The air smelled like rain and exhaust. People walked past me on the sidewalk, and I felt like a ghost, invisible, already convicted in a crime I didn't commit. My phone had 17 missed calls. 6 from my mother, 4 from unknown numbers, probably reporters. Jessica had warned me that news of the embezzlement had leaked. 3 from my credit card companies, and 4 from Richard. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone as I listened to his voicemails. The first one was time, stamped from 2 hours earlier, right after the police had arrived at the office. Catherine, it's Richard. I just found out what you've been doing. I can't believe it. After everything I did for you, after I trusted you, please call me. Maybe we can fix this. Maybe there's an explanation. His voice was choked, like he was crying, like he was the victim. The second message was angrier. How could you do this? How could you steal from our clients, from me? I defended you to everyone, Catherine. I promoted you. I believed in you. And this is how you repay that trust. The third was coldly professional. I've been advised by our legal team not to contact you further. Consider this your termination notice. Your access to all company systems has been revoked. Any attempt to contact me or other employees will be considered harassment. The fourth message, left just 10 minutes ago, was the worst. I hope it was worth it. Catherine, I hope you enjoy that money, because you're going to spend the rest of your life paying for what you did. I'll make sure of it. The satisfaction in his voice. The barely concealed triumph. That's when I knew for certain Richard Hartfield had orchestrated everything. And he thought he'd won. I stood there on the sidewalk, phone pressed to my ear, and people flowed around me like I was a stone in a stream. The city that had felt like home that morning now felt hostile. Alien. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, no way to prove my innocence. What I didn't know was that Richard had made one critical mistake. A mistake that wouldn't reveal itself for another 6 weeks. A mistake that would become the key to destroying him completely. But first, I had to lose everything else. The story hit the news that evening. I watched it on my laptop, sitting on my apartment floor because my legs had stopped working. The reporter stood outside Hartfield and Associates, microphone in hand, expression serious. A senior financial analyst has been accused of embezzling over $400,000 from client accounts at this prestigious Chicago investment firm. Sources say 28-year-old Catherine Weber used her position to systematically steal from wealthy investors over the course of a year. The firm's managing partner, Richard Hartfield, released a statement expressing shock and betrayal. They showed a photo of Richard looking devastated, wearing the same blue tie I'd complimented last week. Standing in front of our office with slumped shoulders, like a man whose faith in humanity had been shattered. It was a masterful performance. Then they showed my employee photo, the one from the company website where I was smiling, confident, professional. The reporter's voice continued. Weber graduated from Northwestern University and was considered a rising star in the financial industry. Colleagues describe her as ambitious and driven. Police say she may have been living beyond her means. Living beyond my means. In my 600-square-foot studio apartment with furniture from IKEA and a TV I'd bought at a pawn shop, the comments on the news website were brutal. Another greedy millennial who wanted everything handed to her. She has that entitled look. Not surprised. I hope she rots in jail. White-collar criminals are the worst. At least rob someone honestly. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my apartment as the sun set. The shadows grew longer, and I didn't turn on any lights. Outside my window, Chicago transformed from gray to black, and all those lights that had looked like diamonds the night before now seemed cold and indifferent. My phone rang. My mother, Catherine. Her voice was shaking. Catherine, baby, what's happening? I saw the news. They're saying you stole money. That can't be true. Tell me that's not true. It's not, Mom. I swear to God, it's not true. Someone framed me. Who would do that? My boss. Richard, he's been stealing money and he made it look like I did it. Have you told the police? They don't believe me. Mom, I don't know what to do. And then I was crying. Really crying. The kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep in your chest, that makes it impossible to breathe. I didn't do anything wrong, and no one believes me. I believe you, she said fiercely. Your father and I believe you. We'll get you a lawyer. A good one. We'll figure this out. But even as she said it, I knew she couldn't afford a good lawyer. My parents were retired teachers living on fixed incomes in Wisconsin. They'd already sacrificed so much to put me through college. They'd remortgaged their house to help with my graduate school tuition. I couldn't ask them for more. I wouldn't. I'll be okay. I lied. I have to go, Mom. I love you. Catherine. Wait. I hung up before she could hear me completely fall apart. That night was the longest of my life. I lay on my bed in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, and my mind raced in circles. How had Richard done this? When had he started planning it? Had anything about our professional relationship been real, or had he been using me from the very beginning? I thought about every interaction we'd had, every compliment he'd given me, every time he'd said I was special, valuable, trustworthy. Had all of it been manipulation? Had he been studying me, learning my patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? And why me? That question burned in my chest like acid. Why had he chosen me to destroy? But the worst part wasn't the questions. It was the dawning realization of just how thoroughly trapped I was. Richard had my digital signature. He had access to my email. He'd clearly been creating false evidence for months, building a case so airtight that even I could see why the police believed it. He'd probably hacked my bank account and made those deposits himself. Transferred money from client accounts using my credentials, then moved it straight into my account to create a paper trail. Simple, elegant, devastating, and I had no proof it was him. No evidence, no witness, nothing but my word against his, and he was a wealthy, respected businessman with 25 years in the industry. I was a 28-year-old employee who'd risen too fast and now appeared to be a thief. I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m., exhausted from crying, my eyes swollen and burning. I dreamed I was drowning in an ocean of papers, all of them stamped with my forged signature, pulling me down into darkness while Richard stood on the shore and watched. I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on my door. Loud, aggressive knocking that made the whole frame rattle. "Ems Weber, building management. We need to speak with you." I stumbled to the door, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Opened it to find my landlord, Mr. Peterson, looking uncomfortable and angry at the same time. He was holding a piece of paper. "I'm sorry, Ms. Weber, but I need you to vacate the premises within 48 hours. What? Why? Your rent check bounced. And given the situation that's been on the news, I can't have you living here. It's bad for the building's reputation." Or Mr. Peterson, "I've lived here for 3 years. I've never been late on rent once. This has to be a mistake with the bank. I'm sorry," he said again, but he didn't look sorry. He looked scared. Like crime was contagious. "If the rent check doesn't clear by Friday, you're in violation of your lease. I'll have to proceed with eviction." He thrust the paper at me, an official eviction notice, and walked away before I could respond. I closed the door and looked at the notice. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I think I was too empty for shaking. Too hollow. I called my bank. Waited on hold for 17 minutes, listening to cheerful hold music that felt obscene. When a representative finally answered, she sounded nervous when I gave her my name. "Ems Weber, your account has been frozen pending investigation into suspicious activity." What suspicious activity? I'm not at liberty to discuss details, but there's a hold from law enforcement. All deposits and withdrawals have been blocked until the investigation is complete. How long will that take? I can't say. Could be weeks, could be months. I had $300 in cash in my apartment. That was it. No access to my account, even the money that had been legitimately mine before Richard's scheme. No job, and in 48 hours, no home. I spent that day calling every lawyer I could find who advertised free consultations. Most didn't call back once they heard my name. 2 took my call but said they couldn't help me. My case was too high profile, too complicated, and I had no money for a retainer. 1 actually laughed and said, "Sweetheart, you need a miracle, not a lawyer." By afternoon, I was down to my last option, the public defender the police had recommended. His name was David Chen. His office was in a building that smelled like mildew and desperation. The elevator creaked ominously on the way up to the 7th floor. Chen himself was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a cluttered desk covered in case files. When I walked in, he was eating a sandwich over a stack of papers, and he quickly wiped his hands on a napkin. "Catherine Weber," he said. "Sit down. I've been expecting you." "You have?" "High-profile financial crime defendant with no priors and no obvious motive. Evidence that's too perfect." He shrugged. "You were always going to end up here. The question is whether you're smart enough to take a plea deal." "I didn't do anything wrong?" "That's what they all say." "No, I mean it." I was framed. "My boss? Let me stop you right there." Chen held up his hand. "I've read the evidence file. It's comprehensive, damning. You've got transaction records, email correspondence, digital signatures, bank statements. The prosecution has everything they need for a conviction. Because it was all fabricated, he had access to my credentials. Can you prove that?" "Not yet, but then here's what's going to happen. The DA is going to offer you a plea deal. 7 to 10 years, probably. You'll serve maybe 5 if you behave yourself. If you go to trial and lose, which you will, you're looking at 15 to 20. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of my chair. 5 years in prison for something I didn't do. Welcome to the American justice system. He took another bite of his sandwich. "Look, I'll represent you at trial if that's what you want. I'll do my best. But my best isn't going to be enough against the evidence they have. Take the plea. Do your time. Rebuild your life." I stood up. My legs were shaking now, and my voice came out rough and broken. "If you don't believe me, then you can't represent me. I need someone who will fight. I'm being realistic. You're being defeatist. There's a difference." I walked out of his office, down that creaking elevator, back into the Chicago afternoon where the sky was the color of concrete and the air tasted like ash. People hurried past me on the sidewalk, everyone going somewhere important, and I stood there trying to figure out where I could go. Not home. That wasn't mine anymore. Not my office. I'd been banned. Not my parents. I couldn't drag them into this nightmare. Not to friends. What friends? I'd worked such long hours that I'd lost touch with everyone outside the office, and everyone from the office now believed I was a criminal. I had nowhere, no one, nothing. That's when I saw her. Across the street, getting out of a sleek black car. My ex-college roommate, Melissa Tran. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but I'd followed her on social media. She'd done well for herself, corporate lawyer at a big firm, engaged to some finance guy, living the life we'd both dreamed about during late-night study sessions. I crossed the street without thinking. "Melissa!" She turned, and her expression went from confused to horrified when she recognized me. "Catherine." "I know you probably saw the news, but I swear it's not true." I was framed. "I need help. I need someone who believes me." "Catherine, I can't." She looked around nervously, like being seen with me was dangerous. "I'm sorry, but I can't be associated with this. My firm would. I'm not asking you to represent me, I just need advice. Please. You're the only person I know who might understand. I really can't." "I'm sorry." She took a step back, actually physically retreating from me. "I hope you figure things out. I really do. But I can't help you." She got back in her car and drove away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk. A man walking past gave me a strange look, then his eyes widened in recognition. He'd seen the news. He pulled his phone out, probably to take my picture, to post on social media. Saw the embezzler from the news. "She looks rough." I turned and walked quickly away, head down, shoulders hunched. Trying to become invisible. Trying not to exist. I ended up at a coffee shop I'd never been to before, in a neighborhood where no one would recognize me. I bought a coffee with my dwindling cash and sat in the back corner, staring at nothing. The coffee tasted burnt and bitter. The air smelled like overheated milk and industrial espresso. Someone's baby was crying. A group of college kids was laughing about something, their voices too loud, too carefree. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Give up yet. This is only the beginning. Richard." He'd sent it from a burner phone. Taunting me. Making sure I knew he was behind everything, I stared at that text for a long time. The smug cruelty of it. The confidence that he'd won. That he'd broken me completely. And something inside me changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no inspiring music, no sudden moment of clarity. It was quieter than that. Colder. I felt the fear and desperation that had been consuming me crystallize into something harder. Something that felt almost like calm. Richard thought he'd destroyed me. He thought I was helpless, friendless, defenseless. He was wrong. I couldn't prove my innocence yet. But that didn't mean the proof didn't exist. It just meant I hadn't found it yet. I pulled out my laptop and started making a list. Everything I knew about Richard. His habits, his patterns, his weaknesses. Who he met with. Where he went. What accounts he managed. I documented every interaction we'd ever had, every conversation. Every email exchange I could remember. If Richard had been studying me for months to frame me, I was going to study him right back. And somewhere in the web of lies he'd built, there would be a thread I could pull. A mistake he'd made. Evidence he'd overlooked. I just had to find it before I lost everything. But the universe wasn't done punishing me yet. That night, I returned to my apartment to find everything I owned sitting in boxes in the hallway. Mr. Peterson had gotten an emergency eviction order. My door had a new lock. Inside, through the window, I could see another tenant's furniture already being moved in. I stood there in the fluorescent, lit hallway, looking at my entire life reduced to 6 cardboard boxes, my clothes, my books, my laptop, my few mementos from college. 28 years of existence, packed up and left in a corridor like trash. A neighbor I'd always been friendly with, Mrs. Huang from 4B, walked past. She saw me and quickly looked away, hurrying to her door. She'd also seen the news. She thought I was a monster. I sat down on the floor next to my boxes and tried to figure out what to do next. It was 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night in November. It was starting to rain outside. I could hear it against the hallway window, a soft pattering that would turn brutal soon. I had nowhere to go. I had $280 to my name. I had 6 boxes of possessions and no car to transport them. I had a phone that kept buzzing with messages from reporters, lawyers calling about class action lawsuits from Richard's clients, and collection agencies saying my credit cards were in default. That's when I hit rock bottom. Not when I was accused, not when I was arrested, not even when I was evicted. It was sitting on that cold floor, surrounded by boxes, listening to rain I couldn't even see, and realizing that Richard had taken everything, my career, my home, my reputation, my future, my sense of safety in the world, everything. I put my head in my hands and cried. Not the dramatic sobbing from before. This was quiet, exhausted, hopeless crying. The tears of someone who'd fought as hard as they could and still lost. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that at that exact moment, 2 things were happening that would change everything. First, Richard was in his office celebrating with his mistress, getting sloppy drunk on expensive champagne, talking too freely about what he'd done, and she, thinking it was romantic to document everything, was recording him on her phone. Second, my father was opening a safe deposit box he'd kept secret for 20 years. Inside was a letter he'd written to me, an old bank card, and information about an inheritance from my grandmother that he'd been saving for a genuine emergency. He didn't know what the emergency would be, but he knew that when it came, I'd need more than money. I'd need proof that I was worth fighting for. I'd need a weapon, and in 3 days, that weapon would arrive in my hands like an answer to a prayer I'd been too broken to say out loud. But that night, sitting in that hallway with nowhere to go and nothing left to lose, I had no idea salvation was coming. I just knew I had to survive one more day. Somehow, I had to survive. I spent that night in a women's shelter on the south side. The kind of place I donated to before, but never imagined needing myself. The woman at the intake desk didn't recognize me from the news, or if she did, she didn't care. She just gave me a bed in a room with 7 other women, a towel that smelled like industrial bleach, and a meal of vegetable soup that was mostly broth. The room was hot and close, smelling of too many bodies in too small a space, mixed with disinfectant and the lingering scent of cigarette smoke someone had brought in on their clothes. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone was crying softly 3 beds over. Someone else was snoring. A woman near me was muttering in her sleep, arguing with someone who wasn't there. I lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, and I understood something I'd never fully grasped before. How quickly you can fall. How fast the world can transform from safe to hostile. How easily you can become invisible. 3 days ago, I'd been a senior financial analyst with a promising career. Tonight, I was homeless, broke, and facing 15 years in prison. The fall had taken 72 hours. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to someone shaking my shoulder. one of the shelter workers, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "You have a visitor?" she said quietly, trying not to wake the others. "Says he's your father, my father." "Here." I stumbled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and followed her to the intake office. And there he was, William Weber, 60, 3 years old, retired high school math teacher, wearing his old brown jacket and looking older than I'd ever seen him. His face was lined with worry, his eyes red from crying or not sleeping or both. When he saw me, something in his expression broke. He opened his arms, and I walked into them, and he held me like he had when I was small and had nightmares, like he could protect me from the whole world. "Dad," I whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "You have nothing to be sorry for." He pulled back and looked at me, really looked at me, and his jaw tightened. "I know you didn't do this. Your mother and I know. The evidence? I don't care about evidence. I know my daughter. I know what you're capable of and what you're not." He guided me to a chair and sat beside me, holding my hands. His hands were rough and warm, familiar, safe. "And I'm going to tell you something that should have been told 2 years ago. Something I kept secret because I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that you needed to know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Old, yellowed at the edges. My name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. My grandmother's. "Your grandma Ruth died when you were 10 years old," Dad said. "But before she died, she put money aside for you. A lot of money. She made me promise not to tell you unless you absolutely needed it. Because she wanted you to make your own way in the world. She didn't want money to make you soft." I stared at the envelope. "How much money?" $847,000. The number hung in the air between us. The exact amount I was accused of stealing. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your grandmother made me promise. And because I thought she was right. You were so driven, so determined to succeed on your own merit. I didn't want to take that away from you." He pressed the envelope into my hands. "But, sweetheart, this is the emergency she was saving it for. This is why she set aside this money. Not for a house or a wedding or retirement. For when your ship was sinking, and you needed to know you weren't drowning alone." My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's precise handwriting, dated 2 months before her death. "My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Your father has kept this secret for years, as I asked him to. But some storms are too big to weather without help. I'm leaving you money, but more than that, I'm leaving you permission. Permission to fight back. Permission to be strong when the world wants you weak. Permission to know your own worth when others try to diminish it. You come from a line of stubborn, resilient women. Your great-grandmother survived the Depression. Your grandmother survived an abusive first marriage and built a successful business with nothing but determination and spite. Your mother raised you while working 2 jobs and never complained once. We don't break easily, Catherine. And neither will you. Use this money to fight. Hire the best lawyer. Find the truth. Don't let whoever hurt you get away with it. But more importantly, use this money to remember who you are. A woman worthy of respect, dignity, and justice. I knew you wouldn't need this unless your ship was sinking. But I also knew that if it ever did sink, you'd need more than money. You'd need to know that someone believed in you absolutely. I do. I always have. I always will. Now go remind the world why underestimating you was the biggest mistake they ever made. With all my love, Grandma Ruth." I read it twice. Then 3 times. Tears were streaming down my face, dripping onto the paper and blurring some of the ink. But I could still read every word. Could still feel my grandmother's fierce love reaching across 15 years to catch me. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew something like this might happen. She knew the world could be cruel," Dad said. "Especially to women who dared to be successful. She wanted you to have a safety net made of more than money. She wanted you to have certainty in yourself." There was also a bank card in the envelope. An old debit card connected to an account I'd never known existed. Dad handed me a paper with the PIN number written in his handwriting. "The account has been managed by our family lawyer," he explained. "I've been putting your grandmother's money in conservative investments for the past 15 years, as she instructed. It's grown to just over $900,000 now. $900,000. Enough to hire a real lawyer. Enough to fight back. Enough to prove my innocence. Enough to destroy Richard Hartfield. I looked at my father, this quiet man who'd taught algebra to teenagers for 40 years, who'd never had much money but had always had infinite love. Thank you for coming. I'll always come, Catherine. Always. He squeezed my hands. Now, let's get you out of here and into a hotel. Let's get you a lawyer who actually believes you. And let's remind that bastard who framed you that you're not as helpless as he thinks. For the first time in days, I felt something other than fear or desperation. I felt dangerous. The hotel room smelled like lavender and clean sheets. The bed was soft, the shower had good water pressure, and there was a coffee maker that produced something actually drinkable. It was a mid-range business hotel in downtown Chicago. Nothing fancy, but after 3 days of hell, it felt like a palace. I stood under the hot shower for 20 minutes, letting the water wash away the shelter, the police station, the feeling of being trapped and helpless. When I finally got out, my skin was pink and my muscles had started to unknot. I wrapped myself in the thick white towel and looked at my reflection in the steam, clouded mirror. I looked tired, haunted, but not broken. Not anymore. My father had left me alone to rest, but not before setting up appointments with 2 lawyers he'd researched. Real lawyers. The kind who won cases. The first appointment was tomorrow morning with Margaret Chen, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. The second was with Adrian Foster, a civil litigation lawyer who'd successfully sued corporations for wrongful termination and defamation. I was going to need both. But first, I needed to think strategically. I sat at the hotel desk with my laptop and started researching Richard Hartfield in a way I'd never bothered to before. When he was my boss, I'd admired him. Now I was hunting him. I started with public records. Richard lived in a townhouse in Lincoln Park worth $3 million. He drove a Mercedes S-Class. He belonged to 3 private clubs. His wife, Miranda, came from old Chicago money. Her family owned a commercial real estate empire. Miranda. I'd met her twice at company events. Beautiful, polished, cold. She'd looked at me like I was hired help. Now I wondered if she knew what her husband was doing, if she was complicit or just another person he'd deceived. I dug deeper. Richard's financial disclosures from when Hartfield and Associates went through a regulatory audit 3 years ago showed he lived beyond his means. His income was substantial, managing partner at a prestigious firm, but his expenses were higher. Much higher, gambling debts maybe. Mistress? Bad investments. Whatever it was, Richard needed money, and he'd stolen it using my credentials and identity. But where was it now? Not in my bank account. The police had frozen that and were treating it as evidence. So where had the money actually gone? I made notes, drew connections, mapped out what I knew and what I needed to find out. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Step 1. Prove Richard had access to my credentials and the technical ability to frame me. Step 2. Find evidence of his real financial crimes, wherever he'd actually hidden the stolen money. Step 3. Destroy him so completely he'd never hurt anyone else again. My morning meeting with Margaret Chen was at 9 a.m. in her office on Michigan Avenue. The building was glass and steel, modern and imposing. Her reception area smelled like leather and expensive perfume. Everything about it screamed competence and success. Margaret herself was 50-something, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my old monthly rent. She had sharp eyes and a no-bullshit demeanor that I immediately respected. "Tell me everything," she said after we'd settled in her office. "And I mean everything. Don't leave out details because you think they make you look bad. I can't help you if I don't know the truth." I told her. All of it. My relationship with Richard, the Henderson account, the discovery, the arrest, the evidence. When I mentioned my grandmother's inheritance, she raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, tapping her pen against her notepad. "The evidence against you is substantial," she finally said, "but it's also suspiciously perfect. Real criminals make mistakes. This is too clean, too organized. That actually works in our favor." "How?" "Because it suggests planning, premeditation. Someone with significant resources and technical knowledge set this up. Your boss had means, motive, and opportunity. We just need to prove it." She leaned forward. Here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to file a motion to delay your arraignment while we investigate. Second, I'm going to hire a forensic accountant and a digital forensics expert. They're going to tear apart every transaction, every email, every log entry. If there's evidence of tampering, they'll find it. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. But Catherine, we're not just defending you. We're going to prove Richard Hartfield committed fraud and frame you for it. And when we do, he's going to face charges himself. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. Real, tangible hope. That afternoon, I met with Adrian Foster about the civil case. He was younger than Margaret, early 40s, with an easy confidence that came from winning. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, and the view was spectacular, gray water meeting gray sky, both churning with November storm. Wrongful termination, he said, reviewing my case. Defamation. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. We can argue all three. And if we can prove Richard deliberately framed you, we're looking at fraud, conversion, possibly RICO violations if he's been doing this to others. Others. If he framed you this elaborately, there's a chance you're not his first victim. Or his last. We should investigate his history. Look for patterns. Adrian smiled. And it was the kind of smile that suggested he enjoyed destroying bad people. Let me be clear about what we're doing here. We're not just getting your job back. We're going to bankrupt him, ruin his reputation, make sure he never works in finance again. Does that sound like something you want? Yes, I said, and my voice was steady. Certain. I want him destroyed. Good, because that's what I do best. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a different person. Not broken and desperate, but focused and relentless. I worked with Margaret's team, providing details about Richard's habits, his access to my computer, the times he'd asked for my passwords, for efficiency. I met with the forensic accountant, a brilliant woman named Dr. Sarah Park, who started tracing the money trail. And I did my own investigation. I contacted Jessica from accounts, the one person from the office who'd tried to warn me. We met at a coffee shop far from downtown, and she looked nervously around the entire time like we were doing something illegal. I could lose my job for talking to you, she said. I know. And I wouldn't ask if I had another choice. But Jessica, Richard framed me. He stole that money and made it look like I did it. I need to prove it, and you're the only person who might be able to help. She bit her lip, conflicted. Then, okay. What do you need? Access to the internal server logs. Records of who logged into my accounts and when. Any communications Richard had about the Henderson account before I was arrested. I can't get you server logs. That's IT territory and they're locked down. Can you tell me who in IT might be sympathetic? Someone who doesn't like Richard. Someone who might have noticed something off. She thought for a moment. Marcus. Marcus Liu. He's a junior systems admin. And I've heard him complain about Richard before. Something about being asked to do things that seemed questionable. I don't know details, but maybe he'd talk to you. Getting to Marcus took another week of careful planning. I couldn't just show up at the office. I was banned, and Richard probably had security watching for me. Instead, I found out where Marcus went for lunch, a Thai place 2 blocks from the office. I waited there for 3 days before he showed up. When he did, I approached carefully, hands visible, voice calm. Marcus, my name is Catherine Weber. I know you've heard about me. I know what they're saying. But I need 5 minutes of your time, and then I'll leave you alone forever. He looked scared, ready to run. But something in my expression must have convinced him because he nodded and sat down. 5 minutes. Richard Hartfield asked you to do something with user credentials, didn't he? Something that felt wrong. His eyes widened. How did you? Because he used my credentials to frame me for embezzlement. And I think you helped him without knowing what he was really doing. Marcus went pale. He said it was for security testing. He said he needed to access your account to check for vulnerabilities. I gave him temporary admin access, and he, oh my God! He put his head in his hands. I helped him frame you. You didn't know. But Marcus, I need you to help me now. I need you to testify about what he asked you to do. I need server logs showing when my account was accessed from his computer. Can you do that? I could go to jail. You could go to jail if you don't. You helped someone commit fraud. Your only chance is to cooperate and show you were deceived too. He was quiet for a long moment. The restaurant smelled like lemongrass and chili oil. Someone's phone was ringing. A waitress laughed at something in the kitchen. Normal sounds in a normal world while we discussed destroying a man's lies. Okay, Marcus finally said. I'll help you. But I need immunity. I need protection. My lawyer can arrange that. And she did. Margaret Chen contacted the prosecutor's office, and Marcus Liu became a cooperating witness. Within days, we had server logs showing that Richard had accessed my account over 200 times in the past year. Had read my emails, copied my writing style, used my credentials to authorize fraudulent transactions, but we still didn't know where the money had actually gone. The 427 Zhaozhen that had been briefly deposited in my account had been transferred out again within hours. The police had that transaction record. It had gone to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account we couldn't trace until Dr. Park found the connection. Look at this, she said, spreading papers across Margaret's conference table. We were all there, me, Margaret, Adrian, Dr. Park, and a digital forensics expert named James Coe. The offshore account received the funds from Ms. Weber's account, but before that, it had received 37 other deposits over the past 3 years. Small amounts. 10,000 here, 15,000 there. All from different sources. All from client accounts at Hartfield and Associates. Richard's been stealing for 3 years. I said, at least. And he's been careful. The amounts were small enough not to trigger immediate audits, but they add up to over 3 million. Margaret leaned forward. Can we connect that offshore account to Richard? Not directly. It's in the name of a shell company. But, Dr. Park smiled. The shell company has an address, a registered agent, and that agent also represents 3 other businesses, one of which is a consulting company that pays quarterly fees to Miranda Hartfield, Richard's wife. He's been funneling money through his wife's business, Adrian said. That's how he's been hiding it. Stupid, Margaret said with satisfaction. Involving his wife creates a whole new set of legal vulnerabilities. We can pierce the corporate veil. We can prove she knew or should have known. This is how we get him? James Coe, the digital forensics expert, had been working on another angle. He looked up from his laptop. I found something else. Richard's personal laptop, the one he uses at home, has been accessing the offshore account. I can prove it through IP addresses and login timestamps. He's been checking his stolen money from his home computer. How did you get access to his home computer? I asked. James gave me a look that said, don't ask questions you don't want answered. Let's just say Richard has very poor cybersecurity practices. And leave it at that. Over the next week, everything came together. We had server logs proving Richard framed me. We had financial records tracing the stolen money to accounts he controlled. We had Marcus Liu willing to testify. We had evidence of a years-long embezzlement scheme. We had everything we needed to destroy him. Margaret filed new motions with the court, not just defending me, but accusing Richard Hartfield of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and conspiracy. The DA's office reviewed our evidence and suddenly became very interested in our cooperation. And then we scheduled the confrontation. Margaret arranged a meeting with Richard, his lawyers, the DA, and all of us. It was framed as a settlement discussion for my case. Richard probably thought he was coming to watch me beg for a plea deal. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The meeting was in a conference room at the DA's office. Gray walls, long table, harsh fluorescent lights. I got there first with my legal team. We spread out our evidence in neat stacks. Server logs, financial records, testimony transcripts, digital forensics reports. A paper trail leading straight to Richard Hartfield's guilt. When Richard walked in with his 3 lawyers, he looked confident. Smug. He was wearing an expensive suit and a silk tie. His hair was perfectly styled. He looked like a man who'd won. Then he saw me. His expression flickered. Just for a second I saw surprise, then anger, then calculation as he tried to figure out what I was doing here with lawyers he probably knew cost more than I should be able to afford. Catherine, he said, and his voice was smooth, concerned. I'm glad you're here. I've been hoping we could resolve this without further pain for everyone involved. Sit down, Mr. Hartfield, Margaret said. Her voice was cold as ice. Richard sat. His lawyers flanked him, looking wary now. They could sense the change in atmosphere. The DA, a woman named Patricia Gomez, opened the meeting. Mr. Hartfield, We've received new evidence in the Catherine Weber case. Evidence that substantially changes our understanding of what occurred. What evidence? One of Richard's lawyers asked. Margaret slid a folder across the table. Server logs showing that Mr. Hartfield accessed Ms. Weber's computer accounts over 200 times without authorization. Digital forensics proving he used her credentials to authorize fraudulent transactions. Financial records tracing stolen funds to offshore accounts he controls. Testimony from your own IT administrator describing how Mr. Hartfield requested access to Ms. Weber's accounts under false pretenses. Richard's face went white. That's not true, I never. We also have evidence, Adrian interrupted smoothly, that Mr. Hartfield has been embezzling funds from client accounts for at least 3 years. The total amount stolen exceeds $3 million. The funds were funneled through shell companies and ultimately paid to businesses controlled by Mr. Hartfield's wife, Miranda Hartfield. You're lying, Richard said, but his voice had lost its confidence. This is desperation. You're inventing evidence because you know Catherine is guilty. I spoke for the first time. I'm not guilty, Richard. But you are, and now everyone knows it. He stared at me with naked hatred. The mask was slipping, the professional facade cracking. You can't prove any of this. We can prove all of it, Margaret said. She opened another folder. We also have communications between you and your wife discussing the offshore accounts. We have bank statements showing suspicious transfers. We have client account records showing systematic theft. We have everything. This was partially a bluff. We didn't have communications between Richard and Miranda yet, though we suspected they existed. But Richard didn't know that. His face went from white to gray. One of his lawyers started flipping through our evidence, and I watched his expression change from dismissive to horrified. Mr. Hartfield, Patricia Gomez said, at this time, I'm prepared to drop all charges against Catherine Weber. And I'm prepared to file charges against you for fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Unless you'd like to cooperate. Cooperate? Richard's voice came out strangled. With what? Tell us where all the money is. Provide testimony about any accomplices. Return the stolen funds to the clients. And accept a plea agreement for reduced sentencing. Richard looked around the table like a trapped animal, at his lawyers who were carefully avoiding eye contact, at me, sitting calmly with my hands folded, at the DA, who was watching him with professional detachment, at the evidence scattered across the table, documenting his crimes in black and white. I want immunity, he said desperately. I'll talk, but I want complete immunity. You're not getting immunity, Patricia said flatly. You committed serious crimes over multiple years. The best I can offer is 15 years instead of 30. Take it or leave it. 15 years. Richard's voice broke. I can't. I have a family. I have a reputation. This will destroy me. You destroyed Catherine Weber's reputation, Margaret said quietly. You destroyed her career, her home, her sense of safety. You tried to send her to prison for crimes you committed. 15 years is mercy you don't deserve. Richard turned to me then, really looked at me. Catherine, please. You know me. You know I'm not a bad person. I made mistakes, but you're not a good person. I interrupted. Good people don't systematically destroy innocent people's lives to save themselves. Good people don't steal from clients who trusted them. Good people don't frame their employees for crimes they committed. I gave you opportunities. I promoted you. Everything you achieved was because of me. Everything I achieved was in spite of you. You were never my mentor, Richard. You were always my predator. You just hit it well. He lunged forward then, actually stood up and leaned across the table toward me, face twisted with rage. You ungrateful? His lawyers grabbed him, pulled him back. Security stepped forward. And Richard Hartfield, managing partner of Hartfield, and Associates, respected businessman and community leader, completely fell apart. He started yelling, screaming about how everything was everyone else's fault. How his wife was too expensive, how clients demanded too much, how employees like me were supposed to be loyal. It was an ugly, pathetic meltdown that destroyed whatever remained of his professional image. The DA let him rant for about 30 seconds. Then she stood up. Mr. Hartfield, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. I watched them handcuff him. Watched them lead him out of the conference room while he was still protesting, still trying to explain, still refusing to accept that he'd lost. The door closed behind him and the room went quiet. Margaret turned to me. "Congratulations, Catherine. You're officially innocent. All charges dropped. I should have felt triumphant, victorious, but mostly I just felt exhausted. What happens now? Now Richard goes to trial. His assets get frozen. His wife probably files for divorce to protect her family money. His clients sue him for fraud. The firm investigates who else knew about the embezzlement, and you." Margaret smiled. "You get your life back." Richard Hartfield's arrest made national news. The same reporters who'd vilified me now ran stories about the shocking betrayal of trust, the sophisticated fraud scheme, the innocent employee who'd been nearly destroyed by her guilty boss. My face was on the news again, but this time with headlines like "Wrongfully Accused Analyst Vindicated" and "Investment Firm Boss Arrested for Embezzlement." The comments on the articles had changed too. I knew something was off about her case. The evidence was too perfect. This is why we shouldn't rush to judgment. That poor woman lost everything. I hope she sues him for everything he's worth. That boss should rot in prison forever. But vindication in the media didn't undo the damage. My apartment had been rented to someone else. My credit was destroyed. My reputation would take years to fully repair. The psychological scars from being hunted, homeless, and hopeless would probably never fully heal. But I was free. I was innocent. And Richard Hartfield was facing 30 years in federal prison. Over the next 3 months, I watched his life disintegrate the way mine had. But where my destruction had been undeserved, his was justice. First, Miranda Hartfield filed for divorce. She released a statement through her lawyer claiming she'd had no knowledge of Richard's crimes and was shocked and devastated by his betrayal. Whether that was true or just self-preservation, I didn't know. But she was cutting ties fast, protecting her family's money and reputation. Second, Hartfield and Associates was dissolved. The other partners, facing their own investigations, liquidated the firm's assets and settled with clients. Everyone who'd worked there, including Jessica, lost their jobs. I felt guilty about that until I remembered that many of them had been quick to believe I was guilty. They turned their backs on me without question. Third, Richard's clients filed a class action lawsuit. They sued him personally, his wife, the dissolved firm, and even the bank that had processed his fraudulent transactions. The litigation would take years, but Richard's personal assets were frozen immediately. The Lincoln Park townhouse, the Mercedes, the country club memberships, all gone. Fourth, federal prosecutors added more charges as they investigated deeper. Money laundering, tax evasion, wire fraud. Each new indictment added years to his potential sentence. His lawyers tried to negotiate plea deals, but Patricia Gomez wasn't interested in mercy anymore. Not after Richard's meltdown in the conference room had been witnessed by multiple attorneys and security personnel. And fifth, the one that gave me the most satisfaction, Richard's reputation was completely destroyed. Articles were written about his fraud scheme, his systematic abuse of employees' trust, his narcissistic belief that he was entitled to other people's money. Former colleagues gave interviews describing how he'd always been suspicious, always seemed too interested in other people's accounts, always pushed ethical boundaries. People who'd praised him months ago now claimed they'd always known something was wrong. I watched it all from the sidelines, rebuilding my own life piece by piece. Adrian Foster filed a civil lawsuit on my behalf against Richard and the dissolved firm. We sued for wrongful termination, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. The amount? $25 million. We'll never collect that much, Adrian explained. Richard's assets will be seized to pay back his victims. But we'll get something. And more importantly, we'll have a legal judgment establishing your innocence and his guilt. That's worth more than money. He was right. The lawsuit settled 6 weeks later for $3.8 million. Richard's insurance company paid most of it to avoid trial. It wouldn't fully compensate me for what I'd lost, but it was something. Validation. Acknowledgement that I'd been wronged. I also received back pay and damages from Hartfield and Associates Liquidation Fund. Another $450,000. Combined with my grandmother's inheritance, I had financial security for the first time in my life. But the money wasn't why I'd fought. I'd fought because being branded a criminal when you're innocent is a special kind of hell. I'd fought because Richard Hartfield needed to face consequences. I'd fought because no one else should suffer what I'd suffered. 2 months after his arrest, I received an unexpected call from Richard's lawyer. He wanted to arrange a meeting. Richard wanted to apologize, to explain, to try to make things right before his trial. Margaret advised against it. You don't owe him anything. Not your time, not your attention, definitely not your forgiveness. But I wanted to see him. Not to forgive, but to look him in the eye one last time, to show him that I'd survived, that I'd won. The meeting was at the federal courthouse, in a private attorney-client room. Richard was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking 20 years older than he had 3 months ago. His hair was greasy and gray. His face was gaunt. He'd lost weight, and not in a healthy way. He looked diminished. Small, he sat down across from me, and his eyes filled with tears. Catherine, thank you for coming. I know you didn't have to. I said nothing. Just watched him. I'm sorry, he said, and his voice cracked. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I was desperate. I'd made bad investments, and I was in debt to some very dangerous people. I needed money fast, and I thought if I could just take a little from client accounts, I could pay them back before anyone noticed. But it snowballed. And then when the client started asking questions, I panicked. I needed someone to blame. And you were convenient. Smart enough that it was believable, trusting enough that you wouldn't see it coming. He wiped tears from his face. But I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant for you to lose your apartment, to be homeless. When I heard about that, I felt sick. I wanted to stop, to confess, but I was in too deep. And then when you showed up with lawyers and evidence, I broke. I'm not making excuses. What I did was evil. Unforgivable. I know that. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I let the silence stretch between us, watched him squirm, watched him wait for absolution that wasn't coming. Finally, I spoke. Do you remember what you said to me the night before the Henderson presentation? You said I was the most valuable person on your team. That everything I'd achieved was because you believed in me. I remember. That was a lie. Everything I achieved was because I worked for it, because I was smart and dedicated and good at my job. You didn't make me successful, Richard. You just tried to destroy me when it was convenient. I know. Can you ever forgive me? No. The word hung in the air, flat and final. Catherine, please. You don't get my forgiveness. You don't get my understanding. You don't get closure or peace or whatever you're looking for by apologizing. You systematically destroyed my life. You made me homeless. You tried to send me to prison for 30 years for crimes you committed. You don't get anything from me except this: I survived. I won. And you lost. I stood up. Where are you going? We're not done? Yes, we are. We've been done since the moment you decided to use me as your scapegoat. This meeting was never about your apology, Richard. It was about me looking you in the eye and letting you see that I'm not broken. That you failed to destroy me. That was all I needed. I walked to the door. His voice followed me, desperate now, all pretense of dignity gone. Catherine, please! I have information about other people at the firm, people who knew what I was doing. I'll testify. I'll help you go after them. Just please, talk to the prosecutor. Tell her I'm cooperating. Help me get a reduced sentence. I turned back one last time. I'm not going to help you. You're going to prison for a long time, Richard. And every day you're there, I want you to remember that this is the consequence of your choices. Not bad luck, not circumstance. Your choices. You chose to steal. You chose to lie. You chose to destroy an innocent person's life. This is what happens when you make those choices. Please. But I was done. I opened the door and walked out, leaving him sitting alone in that gray room with nothing but his regrets and his orange jumpsuit. It was the last time I ever saw Richard Hartfield. His trial was 4 months later. I didn't attend. Margaret represented me when my testimony was entered into evidence, but I followed the news coverage. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Marcus Liu testified about Richard's requests for unauthorized access. Dr. Park testified about the money trail. Digital forensics proved Richard had accessed my accounts and sent fraudulent emails. Richard's defense tried to argue he'd had a mental breakdown, that he'd been under extreme pressure, that he deserved leniency. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the The judge called Richard's crimes a systematic betrayal of trust that destroyed lives and livelihoods. She sentenced him to 22 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Richard would be 75 years old before he was eligible for release. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His marriage was dissolved. His wealth was gone. He'd lost everything, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. 1 year after Richard's arrest, I sat in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, looking out at rain-soaked streets and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. I'd left Chicago 6 months earlier. There were too many memories there, too many places that triggered anxiety. I needed a fresh start somewhere new. Somewhere no one knew my story unless I chose to tell it. Portland was rainy and green and full of people who minded their own business. I'd bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms and a backyard with a garden that the previous owner had loved. I'd taken up gardening myself, finding something meditative about working with soil and watching things grow. I wasn't working in finance anymore. I discovered during my months of fighting Richard that I was good at investigation, at tracing patterns, at uncovering truth. So I'd used my CFA certification and my newfound skills to start consulting for law firms on financial fraud cases. I worked from home, set my own hours, chose my own clients. I helped people prove they'd been wronged. I helped catch people like Richard, and I was happy. Really, genuinely happy in a way I'd never been when I was climbing the corporate ladder at Hartfield & Associates. That morning, sitting in the coffee shop with rain pattering against the windows and jazz playing softly over the speakers, my phone buzzed with an email from Margaret Chen. Subject: Thought you'd want to know. Catherine Richard Hartfield was transferred to federal prison in Colorado last week to begin serving his sentence. I thought you'd want to know he's officially incarcerated. Justice served. Also, I heard through legal channels that Miranda Hartfield has been cooperating with prosecutors on other fraud cases. Turns out she knew more than she initially claimed. She's testifying against several of Richard's former business associates in exchange for immunity. The truth always comes out eventually. Stay well, Margaret. I read the email twice, then closed my phone and looked back out at the rain. I felt no triumph, no anger, no satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of closure. Richard was in prison. Miranda was facing her own consequences. The clients who'd been defrauded were slowly being compensated through asset seizures and settlements. The world had righted itself as much as it could. And I was here, in a new city, with a new life, finally free of the shadow that had hung over me for a year. My phone rang. My mother. Hi, sweetheart. Just checking in. How are you? I'm good. Really good. It's raining here, which I know sounds depressing, but I actually like it. It's peaceful. Good. You deserve peace. I could hear the smile in her voice. Your father and I were talking about visiting next month. We want to see your new place, meet your friends. I'd made friends here. Real friends. People who knew my story but didn't define me by it. A woman named Sarah who ran a bookstore and had survived her own nightmare of an abusive ex-husband. A couple named James and Tom who'd welcomed me into their friend group without judgment. A therapist named Dr. Reeves who was helping me process trauma and rebuild my sense of safety. I'd love that. I told my mother. I'll show you my garden. I'm growing tomatoes, and they're actually not dying. She laughed. Your grandmother would be proud. She had the best garden on the block, Grandma Ruth. I thought about her letter often, about her fierce insistence that I remember my worth, that I fight back, that I refuse to break. She'd been right. I came from stubborn, resilient women, and I hadn't broken. Mom, I need to tell you something. What is it? Thank you. Thank you for believing me when no one else did. Thank you for Dad coming to find me when I was at my lowest. Thank you for the inheritance that gave me the resources to fight back. I couldn't have survived without you. She was quiet for a moment, and I knew she was crying. You would have survived anyway. You're stronger than you know, but I'm glad we could help. That's what family does. After we hung up, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching people come and go. A young woman in business attire, checking her phone frantically, clearly stressed about work. An older man reading a newspaper, completely at peace. A couple sharing a muffin, laughing about something private, normal people living normal lives, just like me now. I'd learned things over the past year that I wished I didn't know. I'd learned how quickly safety can disappear, how easily reputation can be destroyed, how many people will turn their backs when you need them most, how the justice system doesn't always work the way it's supposed to, how money and power can corrupt good people and protect bad ones. But I'd also learned that resilience is real, that some people will believe in you even when the evidence says they shouldn't, that justice, while slow, can eventually prevail, that you're stronger than you think you are, that hitting rock bottom doesn't mean you have to stay there. I'd learned that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is also the thing that transforms you into who you were always meant to be. I wasn't the same Catherine Weber who'd walked into Hartfield and Associates on that cold November morning, believing her boss was her mentor. That Catherine was naive, trusting, too eager to please. She'd believed that hard work and loyalty were always rewarded, that good people could trust authority figures, that the world was fundamentally fair. The new Catherine knew better. She was careful, strategic, independent. She trusted slowly and verified everything. She knew that fairness was something you fought for, not something you assumed. She was harder in some ways, but also more authentic, more herself. Before I left the coffee shop, I opened my laptop and wrote an email to Patricia Gomez, the prosecutor who'd helped bring Richard down. Ms. Gomez, I wanted to thank you for believing the evidence even when it contradicted the initial narrative. You helped save my life by being willing to look deeper. I'd like to offer my services pro bono to your office if you ever need a financial analyst to help with fraud investigations. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone else. If I can help prevent it by using my skills, I'd like to. Let me know if you're interested. Sincerely, Catherine Weber. She responded within an hour, absolutely interested. Let's talk, and just like that, I had a new purpose. Not just rebuilding my own life, but helping others in similar situations. Using what I'd learned, what I'd suffered, to make sure Richard Hartfield wasn't the only predator who faced consequences. That evening, I stood in my backyard as the rain stopped and the clouds broke apart to reveal a sunset that painted the sky orange and pink and gold. The air smelled like wet earth and growing things. My tomato plants swayed in the breeze, heavy with fruit that would be ready to harvest soon. I thought about Richard, sitting in a prison cell in Colorado. I didn't wish him harm. I wasn't that person. But I didn't wish him well either. I simply didn't think about him much anymore. He'd taken up enough space in my head for one lifetime. I thought instead about my grandmother, who'd known that someday I might need saving and had planned for it. About my father, who'd kept her secret for 15 years and revealed it at exactly the right moment. About my mother's unwavering belief. About Marcus Liu, who'd risked his career to tell the truth. About Margaret Chen and Adrian Foster and Dr. Park, and everyone else who'd fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. I thought about the fact that I'd been through hell and came out the other side not just surviving, but actually living. If you're listening to this story and you're in a situation like I was, wrongly accused, systematically destroyed, made to feel helpless and alone, I want you to hear this. You are stronger than you know. You are not alone, even when it feels like you are. The truth matters, and if you fight long enough and hard enough, it will come out. Justice is possible, even when it seems impossible. Your worth is not determined by what others say about you. And rock bottom is not the end of your story. It's sometimes the beginning of your transformation. Don't give up. Don't stop fighting. Don't let them break you, because they tried to break me. They tried so hard, and I'm still here, stronger, freer, more myself than I've ever been. That's my revenge, living well. Building a life that matters. Being happy in spite of everything they did to take that away from me. Richard Hartfield stole my job, my apartment, my reputation, my sense of safety. But he didn't steal me. He didn't steal my core. He didn't break what mattered most. And that's the real victory. Not the court case. Not the money. Not even his imprisonment. The victory is standing in my backyard in Portland, watching the sunset paint the sky, feeling peace settle in my chest, and knowing that I survived. I more than survived. I won. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.